Well, hi. This week's vlog, a bit of a tale of woe, I'm afraid. Fishermania at Oaks, a competition that has been not always the kindest to me. Not always had the best of draws, or don't seem to get too lucky with tickets and all that. But this year I had my second of 2 tickets at the Oaks this weekend. Now, when I was standing in the draw queue, a good friend of mine, Adam Richard, said to me, I really fancy the bottom end of a lake called Alders. And I said, alright, what sort of numbers there then? He said 36, 38, 40 or 2. 5 pegs out of 150 pegs that he fancied. And trusty hand went in the bag and produced 38, so fantastic. Immediately I'm right in the epicenter of the area that's looking like it's going to compete for the match. The problem when you draw a peg like this is obviously trying to suss out as quick as possible how you're going to catch a match winning weight. A lot of these fisheries that we go to, they're not places that you go to week in, week out, so it's just about using methods that you know to try and get the best out of your peg. I was a little bit sort of disappointed because the peg was different to how I usually perceive a peg of this type. I had an island at 16 metres bang in front of me, and I had a very attractive looking margin down to my left. I was hoping both of these areas I'd be able to find 2 foot or 2.5 foot of water. Unfortunately, not the case at all. I had about 5 foot all the way down this edge. There was a big tree with lots of roots going into the water, looked very dangerous. When I plumbed up, I could feel lots of different bits of root and all sorts of trouble there. There was an aerator a little bit further around, and I really didn't fancy that either. There was lots of poles and posts going into the water, but there was fish moving. This was a bit of a corner in here. It sort of went along about probably 14 metres and then returned back. At the island, 16 metres, I measured 16 metres, bang in front of myself. I could just get to the corner of the island. I was sort of right on the corner, and it was about 4.5 foot deep there. Really, you know, too deep that to catch to an island. Probably 4 foot up, but yeah, 4 foot deep. And there was a tree on the corner again with lots of roots, so every time I tried to get my rig tight into the bank, I just couldn't do it. Steve Cook was on my right. Steve, Fishermania legend, been in the final numerous times, fantastic angler, a lot of experience, and I knew he was going to be hard to beat. But I thought, I've got this margin to my left, that's going to make my peg better than his. When I saw him plumb up on the far side, he had a lot less water than I did. I would say definitely no more than 3 foot, probably more like 2.5, and it sort of went into a bit of a muddy bank. And that was, again, he only had one option because it was a measured 16 metres that he could reach the island, so he couldn't go left or right, just like me. And that one option looked good, so I thought, well, we'll see. If he can catch there all day, he's going to be dangerous, but the likelihood is he'll probably catch there for an hour or 2. May get the lead on me because the peg's, you know, a better peg across, but then I've got this fantastic margin to work with. So I was sort of thinking to myself, that's probably where the battle lies. Now, all the other lakes, in a situation like this, you can't worry about them. There's 5 lakes in, you cannot worry about any of those other lakes. Because at the end of the day, you can't control anything that goes on. All you can control is what's going on in your peg and try and get the best out of it. And when you've got an area that you know is going to be good and a good angler on that peg, you know that that's probably a focus of where the battle might lie. So it's a fantastic situation to be in a Fishermania qualifier, because you know, most qualifiers you draw, you won't get a chance to win the match. But obviously today I felt I had an outside chance. Anyway, the match started. Thought I'd have a start down the edge. It was deep. I felt I could probably catch a few fish down the edge, leave the far bank to settle a little bit. I just thought I'll have a quick look. Went straight in. Steve was still off his box at this point. We had a little joke about it. Caught a barbel straight away. Then I caught a small carp. So I thought, oh, that's not a bad start. And then it was just, you could just tell it was too deep and the fish hadn't really quite settled there. Steve by this point had gone across, fantastic start. He's had 4 carp in 4 drops, all probably 4 to 6 pound. What an amazing start to a Fishermania qualifier. Immediately put me on the back foot, and I thought, well, I'm going, up against it here. I've gone across onto the bottom, liners, foul hooked a couple of fish, all sorts of problems because it's too deep. It's decision time. Steve's fishing a completely different match to me. What do? Do I try and catch the fish shallow, or do I persevere on the bottom hoping they'll settle? I went with shallow. I felt that the liners and the foul hookers, I needed to try and catch those fish up in the water. So I've started to loose feed a little bit of meat. Very difficult when it's 16 metres, a bit windy. Meat's not a great bait for loose feeding, but I sort of managed to get it in and around the point of the island, and fishing around about, I'd say, a foot to 18 inches deep, I started to catch carp. What was immediately apparent was my fish were half the size of what Steve was catching. 2, 3 pound fish mine were. Steve's were probably 4 to 6 pound, not so much 6 pound, I'd say the average 4 or 5 pound. And I think that the problem with that was I had to catch twice as many. I probably, over the course of the next hour or so, edged ahead in terms of numbers of fish as Steve, probably something like 12 or 13 to his, say, 10. But he had some great fish, and he was fishing fantastically well. So I thought, well, I'm in trouble here. I'm not going to beat him fishing across. It was dying for both of us. So I've gone down the edge. Obviously, going down the edge, I've got a little bit of a dilemma, because immediately I'm leaving the peg for Steve across. So I've got to make sure I'm pinging in a little bit of meat to try and create a little bit of competition. Otherwise, he's going to have it all to himself. And that's important. It also means that if I don't catch down the edge, I can go straight back across and hopefully catch a few more fish. So that's what I did. I kept pinging a little bit of meat across. I've come down the edge again. They weren't there. I couldn't really catch them down the edge. It seemed too deep, and I thought, I think I'm going to have to try and catch how I've been catching across. Shallow down the edge seems a little bit like, not a common method. But what I've done is I've brought my rig up shallow. I've put a pot on with some elastic across so I could tap in little bits of bait at a time, and I've worked the bait down the edge, and I've had a great run. I've had 15 carp in an hour. I've probably lost another 5 or 6 in that time because of the trees and roots. After my first couple of fish, I realised that they were slim mirrors and commons with big tails, very powerful fish, and I needed some strong tackle. I ended up fishing a 16 hollow. I fished about this much elastic through an entire top kit. It was unbelievably hard to pull out. Believe you me, this is not a method that I enjoy. I do not enjoy having to wrestle fish away from snags and things like that. It's very, very frustrating. And even where I was sat with my nets, I was having to reach out all the time because there was snags all in the edge, all sorts of roots. Because of the depth and the bank was undercut, it created a real problem. Obviously when you're fishing across, you haven't got that problem at all, but this was creating me a real problem down the side. So I've had a couple try to get around the aerator. I've had some that have been snagged solid and I've got out. There was 2 or 3 lots of other people's elastic and line in the peg. So it was a nightmare, to be honest, but that's where the fish were. So I persevered, got a few out. Again, they were small, but I was doing all right. I'd probably say with an hour to go, it was neck and neck, me and Steve. He's probably still at the edge. But it's died for both of us. We're really, really struggling to catch. I can't catch across. Steve can't really catch across. It's gone. So it's decision time again. How am I going to try and win the match? I know that with the conditions and with so many people on the venue, it's not going to be a massive weight to win. So what I've done is I've changed. I've dropped down on the bottom, come a little bit further away from the bank, give myself half a chance of getting the fish out. And I've started to feed some meat and hemp. Meat was by far the best bait, and incredibly, I couldn't believe how much better it was than pellets and corn and all that. Meat was definitely the best bait. I think it must be the time of year for that. And I've gone on the bottom and I've caught, I haven't bagged, but I've probably caught 6 carp in the last hour. That's put me ahead of Steve for definite. I thought, well, that's put me ahead of Steve, definitely. And with 10 minutes to go, I thought, catch another 1 or 2 fish, no problems whatsoever. I've hooked another 2, both snagged me up. They were the only 2 I lost on the bottom. I got the other 6 out, but those 2 fish snagged me up. Steve caught one, about £5. I thought, well, that's nearly 3 of my fish. And then I've had one with about 5 minutes to go, about £3. I thought, oh, that's probably just edged me back ahead of him. It's a real tight battle. The whistle's gone, there's no more fish, and I've turned round and Steve's playing the fish. He's got one like 30 seconds or so before the whistle, and he's playing it after time, which is perfectly legal, and he's got it out, and it's about £4 or £5. I think I knew then that that was going to be the fish that pushed him past me, but obviously you never know, and I was hoping not, but the scales unfortunately told a different tale. When the scales got to us, 37, nearly 38 kilos was winning. I really didn't believe that neither me or Steve had that weight. I thought we'd be close. I thought we'd probably have 35, 36 kilos, but we didn't. We had slightly more. Steve's weighed 46,400. Sorry, apologies, 42,400, and I've weighed 41,750, which means there was 650 grams between us, which is £1.5 pounds, something like that. So that £4 fish was enough. That £4 fish was enough to give Steve the edge and victory in the Fishmania qualifier. So I was second, Steve was first. Lovely's come second in the 150 peg match. However, I don't mind admitting that I was absolutely gutted. For me, because you don't get many tickets at Fishmania, and because you don't get many chances in big matches, I was absolutely gutted to have not just taken my chance there. That was my chance. Steve's had a few mishaps, losing a few fish as well. I mean, but I've lost the fish because of the snags and because of the robustness of the tackle I've had to use. But any one of those fish would have been enough to give me the victory. You know, and obviously 30 seconds less and it's also a victory. But like I've said many times in my blog, isn't it amazing the small differences, the very, very small differences at top level match fishing that are the difference between winning and losing. Steve, I hope Steve does go on to win £30,000 in the final. But if that is the case, look at how close a difference that is between winning and losing. Really, really interesting. It's a really interesting battle. We both talked about it afterwards. I'm good friends with Steve. We both talked about it afterwards, and he said meat for him was the best bait. He's fished on the bottom or just off the bottom to keep clear of any rubbish in, like I say, in that shallow water, and caught bigger carp. We both agreed I probably had 10 or 12 carp more than him, but they were just a smaller stamp, so it was just one of those things, not meant to be, unfortunately, which is ever so disappointing. It'll probably hurt for a few weeks yet, but that's the way it goes. Anyway, that's this week. I've got some really interesting stuff coming up. Next few weeks I've got France for the Senses Festival, which I'm really looking forward to. So the blog will be from there next week, and then looking forward I've got both for the World Club Championships and the European Championships at Barnsley, so I'm really, really busy over the next 5 weeks. I'll try and do the blogs as much as possible, but obviously being away, they won't quite be as regular, but I'll keep you updated with what's going on. Thanks, see you soon.